I am Professor Rudra Sil, go by Rudy. I've been teaching at the University of Pennsylvania about 27 years now. Prior to that, I was born in India, grew up all over the world, including London, New York, Damascus, and then back in India for a while. But most of my higher education was in California, in high school and college, and my PhD in political science were at Berkeley, University of California. And since 1996, I've been teaching at the University of Pennsylvania. My area of training was originally Russian and East European studies, but I've branched out into Eurasian studies, East Asian studies more generally. I am a very big proponent of comparative historical work, where countries can be better understood if you use comparisons and also historical context. And so much of my research and my work and my methodological writings have been designed to promote that style of thinking, not as the only way to do research, but as one helpful and important way to understand different kinds of countries, especially countries that are less familiar to us.
Why is it important to rethink and restructure international affairs?
I think a lot of the architecture of knowledge internationally has been dominated by rich and powerful countries for a long time, not just now in the United States, but throughout history. In the 19th century, it was Britain and maybe some of continental Europe that dominated the production of the main ideas, main theories. And after World War II, it's been in the United States, has been the center for producing major concepts, major theories, major paradigms. And the resources that have been put at the disposal of scholarship has created a foundation of knowledge that is good at one level, but has greatly marginalized smart, intelligent, knowledgeable people from other regions that are less influential, countries that are less powerful, less wealthy. And to me, it's always been a problem that international affairs is being understood through a lens that is primarily attached to more influential and more powerful and more wealthy countries. And this is being reproduced now through many channels, including where people want to go to study, where the conferences are held, how easy it is for to do research of different types. If you're from one of the countries of the global south, where there's plenty of good students, plenty of good, smart researchers, but the resources are very limited. So their ability to form networks internationally, collaborate, publish their work in ways that Western scholarship will understand. This has become, I think, a major source of a new kind of north-south gap, if you will, not just in wealth, but in the epicenter of knowledge production. And this has been something that has troubled me as someone who came from India. And I look back and I see so many people who have interesting things to contribute, but they don't have the resources to, develop their research and publish their research. And I think speaking to these people is very, very important. So maybe even if the future is not going to change quickly, even if Western scholars are going to still have the upper hand in terms of having more students, having more resources, having more centers and institutes, it's still going to be important and helpful for them to keep speaking with and increase the number of communications, exchanges, conversations with scholars from the global south institutionally. And I think Central Asia is part of this story as well. They were not only slightly marginalized in the Soviet period, but in the post-Soviet period, as the U.S. attention moved away from the Soviet Union, it moved even further away from Central Asia. And now it's kind of coming back due to various geopolitical considerations. But I'm hoping for a more sincere, more sustained kind of effort to better understand the region, its history prior to the Soviet Union, its the differences among the different countries and their regions. There's a lot we don't know, and I think first and foremost, the desire has to be there to learn more about other people and not just tell people what to do or rely on theories and concepts that have been primarily derived from Western historical experiences, whether it's state building in Europe or the dynamics of what caused World War One and then World War Two and the balance of power in the Cold War. These ideas that all involve the primarily great powers of Europe have shaped the most fundamental concepts. And I think Central Asia can do a lot, I think, to shift that perspective, but hopefully joining hands with Latin American studies, African studies. I mean, all of the regions of the global south, I think, tend to be poorly understood unless there's just a lot of expertise developed. There are, for example, a lot of Latin American studies scholars in the US, so you can expect that. European studies is popular in the US, so you have that. But then it gets thin very quickly. Chinese studies, yes. Middle East studies is going down. Funding for Middle East studies was cut. It's very hard in that environment to expect, Southeast Asian studies, Central Asian studies, Sub-Saharan African studies. These are not areas that are getting a lot of attention, and I think there will be hope. My hope for the future is that this will be corrected.
What component of global development is being overlooked?
Much of the focus on global development is on countable things, life expectancy check, a literacy rate check, and in terms of economic growth, the issue of commerce and trade is at the forefront of everyone's thinking. Foreign investment, ease of doing business in different countries. That's the World Bank's big measure of how easy it is to set up a new business. These are the things that are drawing attention. What is not drawing attention are the people working in these places. I think, in principle, we care about informal labor markets. In principle, we care about exploitation of labor. But overall, there's this real blind spot when it comes to everyday life, when it comes to ordinary people kind of trying to eke out a living. So the gap between those who are in charge of the big businesses, the conglomerates, multinationals, and ordinary people, again, mostly concentrated in the global south, but also in certain parts of the global north, in certain underdeveloped areas, whether it's poorer states or inner city, places in the United States. You definitely see large swaths of people just simply not getting resources, not getting attention. So I think global development has been focused on aggregate efforts to lift up the standard of living, which is good. We need to do that. And it is a measure of something improving. But I think there's a tendency to stop there and not recognize that this overall average hides large numbers of people that are very vulnerable, that may not be officially below the poverty line, but as the global food prices are rising, they're spending more and more of their income on that food, and so they don't have the capabilities to expand their horizons, to send their students to universities. So the vast gap in capabilities. Amartya Sen used to he's the Nobel laureate who used to stress the importance of thinking about human development as about capabilities. And I think the gap in capabilities between uh, those who, let's say, the haves and have-nots, is not going away. Even if you officially show that the average incomes are not getting wider, the capabilities are getting wider. The difference in capabilities, and with climate change, this is going to have an impact on global development in all kinds of ways, not just poor environmental quality or rising global temperatures, but rainfall patterns, access to water, access to energy, differential access to renewable energy. These are going to be problems that I think make our earlier understandings of global development very obsolete in the next 30, 40, 50 years. Uh, I mean, I'm not going to be around, but I'd be very curious to see at the end of the 21st century how people think about the term global development, whether it makes any sense given the scale of the problems and the very big widening gaps between different categories of people within and across regions.
Can you identify three major trends of global development that researchers should focus on?
Well, there are things that I don't especially invest in myself, but I think are unavoidable, which is, a program has to offer the ability to manage changing technologies for studying development, whether it's big data or computers. But it doesn't mean everyone has to do this. It means that programs, institutions, departments have to be able to offer things that incorporate the latest technologies and have some awareness and critical discussions about the dangers of these technologies, because sometimes they create big blind spots, because if the right data set is not available, you can't use big data. So you only focus on the things that you have good data sets for. And that also reproduces the gap between North and South, too, because reliable data is some more concentrated in the research units and governments and bureaucracies of the North. So I think giving the opportunity to learn about the new technologies is one of the things, but I'm personally not super invested in it. I'm more invested in the importance of recognizing local context, recognizing historical challenges, specific problems that specific communities of people are facing. And for that, you need to, I think, global development has to promote a more defensive position of these more traditional ways of pursuing knowledge, of acquiring knowledge, more human contact, more ethnographies, more qualitative research. It is not a statement that qualitative research is superior, but if you don't have it, the quantitative research is going to be misleading and potentially dangerous, even, I think. So I think protecting space for genuine and meaningful qualitative research is, I think, one of the most critical things for global development. And the third thing is questions. What questions to ask? Because I think these are often driven by the priorities of funders. Since so much research depends on money, whether it's coming from government or from corporations, there's a certain sets of topics get a lot of attention, and certain methods as well get a lot of attention. And I think universities have to do a bit better job of supporting, let's say, minority viewpoints, because those minority viewpoints are not minority in terms of importance. They're just in terms of the number of people who are investing in it. So I think having access to this type of these spaces where different voices and approaches that are especially focused on, you know, acquiring knowledge on the ground within their local historical context, the cultural context, their institutional context. That contextual knowledge, I think, is something that we have to really emphasize. But this is all at the level of the broad design of research on a global level. Um, for development, specifically the word development, I think the main issue is to recognize that the way in which we thought about development for the last 100 to 200 years needs to be updated now, with especially with climate change and energy, and these things have become new dominant topics that I think were not really at the forefront when we were talking about development in the 1950s or 1960s.